Welcome to the Courage Barbell Unlimited podcast with your host, legendary powerlifter and strength athlete, Chad Ikes. For most, the journey of strength starts in the gym, but should inevitably expand through all aspects of life. Join us as we discuss all things strength. Now, here's your host, Chad Ikes.
Hey guys, coming at you with another awesome guest today. Today we have Matt Wenning. Matt is somebody who, I think I started a little before Matt, and then Matt came along, and then Matt was at a cool time because he did geared stuff, and then Raw got popular, so he put up these huge Raw numbers. And still to this day, I use various techniques that I learned from Matt with my clients. If I have a chance to go to one of his seminars, I still go to his seminars. I still keep up with everything he's doing. Definitely to me, one of the smarter trainers out there, and somebody who's done it and did it for a long time and then made a bunch more cool innovations. I don't know. Give me some of your best numbers. I don't actually know all your numbers.
Best equipped squat was 1197.6 at right under 300 pounds. 844 bench and 822 deadlift. And then, completely raw, sleeves only belt. 865.5 was the all-time world record, which I took from Scott Weech. So I broke it twice. The record was 826. I took it to 832 and then 865, and then Lillibridge took it to like the fucking moon.
Yeah.
And then I benched 611. It was my best after squatting. And then I was pushing around mid to high sevens on the deadlift. So at that point, I was getting old enough to where the deadlift was the one exercise I just couldn't sustain. It just, as it just slowly trickled down, there was nothing I could do.
Right.
So by the time I was in my late 30s, 765 deadlift was about all I could pull after doing that shit.
Right. So when did you, I don't actually know when you got started in powerlifting.
1992, I did my first bench press meet at 13. I hit 250.
Jesus Christ, you hit 250 at 13 years old.
Yeah, I started training when I was about 12, and
why did you start training?
It was interesting. The cliff notes of the story was I had an uncle that was a fucking psycho, and he wasn't a big powerlifter or anything, but he was always really in shape. But he was also a super partier, and he had motorcycles. I mean, this is like the fucking cool uncle, right?
Yeah.
But he's cool. He's so cool that he can't function in society. So he ends up moving back with us at our house, at my mom's house. And he brings a fan-filled weight set to the house.
Like the old plastic ones? Yeah, those are awesome.
Yeah, and fucking super shitty bars. They're like, 3/4 of an inch thick. And he's bench pressing 135. And I was swimming I was a really good swimmer as a kid because from the car accident, when I got hit by the car, swimming didn't hurt my knees or my ankles or my legs being broken. So I could just swim and mostly upper body. Mm-hmm. So my shoulders and my arms and my back were pretty developed for being a kid. And my uncle's lifting in the family room. And I'm like, hey, uncle, I'm going to come in and lift with you. And he's like, all right, let me take some weight off. I'm like, no, I'll do what you're doing. And he's like, this is 135 pounds. You're not going to fucking do this, I'm like, I can do it. And he's like, fine, motherfucker, try it, after me being a douchebag. So I take the weight out and I fucking blast 135 for 10. I'd never touched any weights. And he's flipping. He's like, what the fuck? He's like, dude, I can barely do that for 10. And he was only like 160 pounds, but he was just shredded, right?
Yeah.
So for him, it was like his body weight. And so my uncle's just like excited of how strong I am. And so that started the process. Well, fuck, maybe I am strong, So my mom, maybe like a month later, asked me what I want for my birthday. And I said, I want a membership to the YMCA. It was a 1 mile bike ride from my house. And just so happened, I get into the YMCA and I'm training there for a couple of weeks. And I noticed an older guy was in his mid-late 50s and a middle-aged guy in his early mid-30s. And they're fucking strong, like stupid strong. And his name was Tim Smith and Jim Dawson. And Jim Dawson deadlifted 744 in 1969.
Wow.
Nobody had pulled 800 yet. And he was kind of known in the Midwest as this fucking badass deadlifter. And Tim Smith bench pressed 500 raw at 181. So these guys were fucking animals.
Yeah.
And they see me at 12 and they think I'm in high school because I'm already like 160. You know, I'm pretty stocky. I mean, I'm not muscular, but I'm big. And they see me like fucking around, not knowing what I'm doing. And they ask me, hey, you know, you're pretty big for being a high school kid. I'm like, no, I'm in like 6th grade. And they're like, what the fuck? And they go, we're getting a hold of your mom. You're living with us. And that's how it started. But a lot of what drove me into the gym initially was my dad passing away about that same time. Probably deep down, not knowing I'm looking for father figures.
Right.
So these two guys are the baddest fucking guys in the city. And I'm thinking, well, fuck, if these guys can replace my dad, you know, these guys are more badass in lifting than my dad is, like, or ever was physically. So that was kind of and that was that generation. You looked up to Arnold and you looked up to Stallone, you looked up to guys that were super fit. And so to me, those were the Stallone and Schwarzenegger of Muncie, Indiana. So them showing me some, you know, some attention and some excitement that I had some interest in it was probably the start of that process. So they get me to do a little bullshit bench meet at 13 and I fucking blast 250, but I'm only weighing like 165.
Yeah.
And that's when they knew. And they were like, if you can hold on to this, we think you can be really good by the time you're in your prime. And I'm like, I don't care how long it takes. I just want to hang out with you guys and train.
Yeah.
So by 16, I'm benching 400. By 18, I'm right at 500. That's when I meet Louie. I squat 700 right before I turned 20 years old. And I tell Louie these numbers, and he's kind of like, what the fuck, you know? And he's like, well, come on down to West Side sometime. So it was a 3-hour drive. So I would take off at 1999 and drive to Louie's place and train with Chuck and Kenny Patterson and George Halbert and all the fucking legends that really made West Side Barbell.
Right.
And but I could hang. I couldn't beat them, but I could hang with them as a kid, and that probably started the process of me seeing what it was going to take to be a world record holder and have that same feeling when somebody walks in to see you that you have the first time you run into George Halbert in that generation, or you run into a Chuck Vogelpool and you're like, this fucking guy is serious. So whether I made it or not, I don't know, but I feel like that was the catalyst to what happened.
Right. And so then you started college and you got your all your, I don't even know what degrees you have, but
yeah, so I have an undergraduate degree in exercise science with a minor in pre-med in case I wanted to switch over to being like a nurse practitioner or a doctor, because my mom's a nurse practitioner. She's like, you need to take these other classes in case you decide, because she didn't know jack shit about the exercise science and coaching community. So she just thought, well, fuck, what are you going to do? Be a trainer at the Y?
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to make enough money. So she always wanted me to have a backup plan for medical because she had hookups into medical. And so then the school story is kind of crazy. So with my dad passing away and me not understanding what I was going through at the time, my high school grades were not great. So when I applied to college, I was initially rejected due to my high school grades. And just so happened the admissions advisor, like the main guy at Ball State, the home school, had seen me training at the weight room at the YMCA because he worked out there. I didn't know him.
Really?
He's like, you're that guy that was on TV a couple of months ago, benching 225 for 45 reps in high school, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, what do you know about creatine? Because creatine had just came out.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, it brings more water into the cells. And when it does that, it brings more ATP. He was asking me to see if I was studying shit or if I was just some meathead freakazoid kid. And I could see his eyes light up at the time, but I didn't understand what was going on. He's like, I'm not going to make any promises, but I might be able to get you in on probation. So they get me in on probation 2 weeks later. School starts like 30 days later. And my first semester, I get like a 3.9 GPA.
Nice.
And so I was written off by high school, college, everything. And I just snuck in the back door, all because of lifting. And the drive, especially because I was paying for my own school.
Yeah.
And at that time, I hate to sound old, but at that time you could work hard and as a job and pay for your college because it was like $1,800 a semester.
Yeah.
So all I had to do was work my welding job at the hospital, and I could just write a check for my school every semester. And I did well enough that Dr. Newton and Dr. Kramer had an eye for me and got me into the graduate program for my biomechanics degree. a little backstory to that. I don't know that I can be a strength coach either. So I didn't know what the limits were on that. And so just so happened my mom worked with the lady that her son was an accountant for the Colts. And right before, I think the first semester I'm in school, I land over the winter a job shadow with John Torring at the Indianapolis Colts. This guy coached Peyton Manning, Edgerrin James, Marvin Harrison. I mean, the list goes on and on. This dude was at the Colts for 16 seasons, if that tells you anything.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So, a lot, yeah. So I basically sit down to him as a punk kid, and he's like, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I can outbench everybody on the Colts team right now." And I said, being a fucking meathead smartass. And he's like, "Yeah, being strong is cool, buddy, but it ain't gonna get you a job like this." And I said, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, you're gonna need to go to school, and you're probably gonna need a master's degree." And I'm like, "But if I do all that, I can have a job like yours, right?" And he goes, "Absolutely." And so he's the one that told me what the steps were going to be. And he said, "Listen, you can't just go to school and work out. You need to go down to the weight room of whoever the strength coach is at Ball State, and you need to shove your head so far up his ass that he ends up helping you through this process, because a lot of this is who you know, and a lot of this is about experience hours." Because in my mind, I'm like, well, fuck, I'm already super strong. If I get these degrees, who doesn't want Matt Wenning, right?
Yeah.
And by the time I graduated with my undergrad, I had 10,000 hours of Division 1A experience. Because every waking hour that they were open, that I didn't have class or I wasn't working out, eventually I worked out in that actual weight room and created a powerlifting team. He goes, every waking hour that you can be there, you're going to collect hours, because when you graduate with that much experience, he goes, you're already 5 years deep into experience level as a full-time Division I college strength coach. Is going to get you a job. And so, long story short, Louis talked me into moving into Columbus after I finished my master's. Actually, he didn't want me to finish my master's. He told me school was a waste of fucking time and I needed to be strong. Yeah. And I was smart enough at that point not to listen.
Right.
And so I end up squatting 903 my first year of grad school, which was crazy at that time because I was still considered a junior. And then 2005, I finished my master's. I can't really compete that year. That was probably when you were hitting some of your bigger numbers.
Yeah, and 2005 to 7, something like that was my biggest one.
Yep. So I finished grad school, moved straight over to Columbus to start training with the big dogs. But I was already driving over there a lot. I just wasn't there full time. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I was at Westside Barbell from 99 to 08.
Full time.
Full time. Well, full time I was there from 04 to 08, and part time, full time from 99 to 08.
Yeah, those are big years for Westside.
Huge. I was there just in time to see the veterans that made Westside Barbell still slightly be in their prime, and the evolution of what we were doing. Because what you have to remember is nobody was using bands for training at all until Dick Hartzell threw them out on the floor at Westside Barbell around 2000, 2001. And then we started calculating a lot of the volume. And a lot of that credit needs to go to George Halbert and Chuck Vogelpohl. Those guys were measuring it with deer scale, trying to figure out mathematics. Louis was also involved with that as well. But Louis ended up taking a lot of the credit because Chuck and George weren't social people and they didn't give a fuck. They just wanted to be the strongest people in the world. So, but
no, I think that's something about Westside a lot of guys don't understand is like Louis gets all the credit, but Louis should get credit for kind of pulling all those people together. But there's a lot of guys that came up with a lot of different shit that is Westside when it was actually one of those other guys that came up with that.
Oh, absolutely. They didn't care that Louis got the credit. That was the one cool thing about Louis. He could get people to really be pro Westside Barbell Louis Simmons and not pro themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't know how he did that. I still can't figure it out to this day. I think there was some kind of aura about it. But I was the first generation to come through Westside Barbell that was actually farmed. So pre-me, there weren't people from all over the world training at Westside. Post-me, there was me and Vlad and Greg Penora. Greg was from Maine. I was from Indiana. Vlad was from Israel. So we had groups that were farmed, not necessarily selected in the slums of Westside, which was Chuck and Kenny and George and those guys, right? So
They were
it was
kind of foreign, but like Louis ended up finding them when they were really young.
they were young and they were doing like little high school meets
Yeah.
local, but they weren't from other cities or other
Right.
countries or other states. The only guy I knew that was back then that drove from very far away to train there, Dave Tate, was at Kentucky, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so was Windler. And Angelo Bernadelli was coming down from Cleveland.
Yeah, I
Other than
forgot about
that,
Angelo. Yeah.
Other than that, all of those guys were actual west side of Columbus dudes.
Right.
So, but I consider Dave Tate like one of those guys. He moved there to train there, but he was young enough when he did it that I think that, you know, that you can consider those guys kind of moderately local.
Yeah.
I was about 3 hours away. So it wasn't like I was real far away, but it wasn't like I was in town either.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
And it seemed like you learned a lot of West Side, but then when you kind of split off, like your numbers just kept going up.
So I left. I was the 5th best in the world, and within about a year, I was the best in the world at 308.
Yeah.
And a lot of that had to do was using a very similar training template, but a lot of what I had to do was I kept reading in Medvedev, Verkhoshansky, and Issarin's books, which are the top researchers from the Soviet Union, that every 30 days you needed at least 2 to 4 days of recovery in order to start a new mesocycle or a 3-week wave. So what I would do is I would moderately train hard week 1, pretty damn close week 2, balls to the fucking wall week 3, and then week 4 I would drop everything down to under 60%. That was the only difference that I did, and my squat went from 1,055 to 1,197 in about 2 years.
See, now we're talking. Basically, you busted your ass, stimulated the shit out of your body, but now you're giving it the time to actually recover and make those gains. I know it's simple as shit, but I keep telling people, like, you don't get stronger in the gym. In the gym, you stimulate growth. You get stronger when you recover. If you're not getting enough recovery, or you're training so much in the gym you can't recover, you're not doing anything.
My point was that I had pushed intensity as far as it was going to get me, and it got me to really high. But then I started to realize if I wanted to be the best, there were so many other facets of understanding that I had to understand. So what you started probably noticing was at about 2011, 12, the diet started to change.
Mm-hmm.
Then the winning warm-ups start to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
So then the skeleton of the exercise, like the skeleton of the conjugate system was still similar, but it was how I was applying it based on my needs at that time. And then I was developing a recovery ideal of understanding that, okay, now I got to figure out what I can recover from. So I started looking at my resting heart rate, and it was dead nut. Like the first week I'd come back from a deload, which was at week 4. So let's go back to week 1. My resting heart rate was up 3-4 beats per minute. Then week 2, it was up 6 or 8 beats per minute. Week 3 was up 12-14 beats per minute. Then I would let it recover, and it was back down to baseline. My heart rate was telling me when I was recovering.
Right.
And Louis never talked about that. And he had all the books that I had sitting right in front of him. But for him, I think he got sucked into the pressure of seeing guys at Rick Hussey's gym, Big Iron, was pushing him so hard, because now there was another gym that was, at that time, world record wise, was becoming equal to us, other than having super heavyweights, that he just couldn't let go and thought that the intensity, he started to go from Russian thought process to I'm going to fucking kill everybody Bulgarian thought process. And those were completely different. And for people that don't know the history, the Bulgarian system is the old Soviet system that they threw in the trash because it damaged too many people, and started to develop a more rotational conjugated system about 1973 to 76, mastering it by about 1987, 88. And the point being is that why would you use an old system? Well, it's really easy. You use an old simple system if all you're looking for is the fucking Bo Jacksons.
Yeah.
You use a complex system if you want to have science and you want hundreds of world record holders that you can study. The Bulgarians didn't give a fuck about studying the athlete. They wanted to find them. And then they wanted to get them peaked, break the records, and then retire them when they're all beat up. The Russians were like, look, we're spending a lot of money on research to develop these power sports. We need to hold these athletes for at least 2, if not 3 quadrennial cycles for Olympics. Why are we going to use a cycle that damages everybody every 4 years to where we can't figure out how this is actually working? It makes perfect sense,
Yeah,
right?
so I mean, to simplify that in my brain, because I'm very blue collar, basically, and I've said this a long time ago, they find the genetic freaks that they can train like mad. They build them up, basically destroy them, and then throw them away and go find another one. Because they started a whole thing where they're picking these kids at a young age, going, "Oh, you got the genetics," and
Yeah,
then
the
by
first
the
thing they
time
look
they're
for is,
mid-20s, they're destroyed.
yeah, and the first thing they look for is the muscular genetics that you and I and the average person would be like, okay, that kid's going to be a fucking animal. Then they took it a step farther and started doing X-rays on their bones and their hip sockets, and if they didn't have properly shaped sockets, they weren't even allowed in the program because they weren't going to be able to take the mileage.
Right.
So now you step that up a bit, but the problem is by the early 70s, the Russians realized that we can't learn anything by just finding a Bo Jackson and training them until they die. We need to make hundreds of masters of athletes with a smarter system so that we actually have empirical data, so we actually understand how the human body responds. That's why it's so important to look at things like Philippines chart and some of these, like the book that's coming out that I got coming out. They're based on hundreds and thousands of athletes that have potential to break Olympic records. Not 5, not 1, not 2, not, well, Ronnie Coleman does it this way, or Dorian Yates does it this way, or Larry Wheels does it this way, or, fucking people like that. They could be one-offs.
Yeah.
But if you can make hundreds of champions each quadrennial, there's got to be something to the program, because you're not going to find that many people that are that good. It's like finding 25 Michael Jordans in the same era.
Right.
It's just not going to happen, right? Unless the developmental process of that training is optimal.
Yes. I think one of the, it's interesting, like even when you describe that now, I think it's, human beings are so interesting, myself included. There's stuff that I read when I was 18 that I go back and read now, and I'm like, what I took away from this is what I wanted to. Like, I didn't actually read this. And I think a lot of times people like, oh, well, this is the Russians. The Russians did all this. And even like you're describing right now, the Russians weren't about crazy intensity. The Russians were like, we need to have intensity, but we got it. Recovery is more important.
Russians never went over 90% in training. They had TFM and CFM, training force maximums and competition force maximums. The Bulgarians had maximums to the fucking gills weekly. Right. The Russians timed their maxes to save that. You and I both know, and Eddie Cohen said it before too, if you truly get to the top, you have 10 real maxes that you have in your body, and that's it.
Yeah.
And you would agree with that?
Yeah. There's a point, and I think that goes back kind of what we were talking about before the podcast, is that like as your body changes and as you get stronger, and even actually George Halbert was one of the first guys I ever heard go, listen, when you get really, really strong, you're going to need more recovery.
Yep.
And that was the first person I ever remember in my head, like where it was like, wait a minute, I'm thinking about this kind of wrong. Like, cause I definitely got that whole blue collar mentality when I first came up, where it was like intensity. I can outwork everybody. And I think you can outwork everybody, but not in terms of, like, to me, work is sleeping and eating and nutrition and the recovery.
Work is reading and understanding.
And
focusing and learning that there are all these factors involved to make you stronger, not just lifting in the gym.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's working. Right. Working is, I'm going to find my weakest links. For the listeners and yourself, I don't keep throwing the book, but it's in there. Lieberg's Law of Minimum is a very interesting topic that actually is utilized in agriculture. But you know how if you make a whiskey barrel and you use those strips of wood, well, it shows in those strips of wood that if you're growing a plant, let's say the plant is the human, that when you fill the barrel, where does it leak out? It leaks out in the shortest position of those wood strips, which is the weakest link. So in agriculture, back in the day, it was nitrogen. If you alter nitrogen, the soil, the plants grow much faster and much stronger. It's the weakest link in the soil. But what happens when the nitrogen is optimized? Now there's another nutrient that's the weak point, then another, then another.
Right.
And so the point being is, if we think about structural weaknesses or thought process weaknesses as the leaking part of that barrel, you plug that. Now it's always a cat and mouse game,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so Lieberg's law of minimum explained that with agriculture, but it makes perfect sense with the human body. You know, you could squat your balls off until the cows come home. If your hamstrings are your weakness, you're not going to get much stronger once you hit peak until that weakness is fixed for multiple reasons. And not going too sciencey into it, but most people don't even understand afferent and efferent motor patterns, meaning that say I need more quadricep to get strong, but my hamstring won't allow my quadricep to fire at maximum because it's a shortcoming and a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
At the spinal cord level, it's going to be a governor. So as you fix those weaknesses, the governors shut down to allow the agonist muscles to actually work because the antagonist muscles can fucking be done correctly. It's like race cars, right? You don't build a fucking 1,000 horsepower race car and have fucking shitty brakes.
Yeah.
Well, why wouldn't the body do that neurologically? It would, and it does. So, but that's why it's so important, and why only the people that get super strong and can sustain it for a long time, which is why I have those 3 pillars of, if you want me to listen to you, there's 3 pillars that you have to have, or at least prove, and some of those pillars are extreme. And the point being is that if you can sustain a high level of strength, you will learn all of these properties because you have to.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
And I mean, I can say that over my career. Like I started out knowing a little bit, and the more I went, in order to keep getting stronger, I had to keep learning.
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of my training is learning. And then, okay, well, what's the weakest link? Well, if I don't know technique, how the hell am I going to figure out what the weakest link is? Like, right. So I got to learn technique and understand technique, not just regurgitate it, but actually understand it.
Yeah, and think about this, man. Technique is a basis of what muscle groups fire at this time right now based on if they're strong or weak. That's technique. So if I bench incorrectly, it's because my brain thinks that these muscles do the work and not the other ones. Mm-hmm. So it's an imbalance of training. Nobody, well, you know, this guy's built different than this guy. And there is some truth to that. But how many of us squatted vertical shank and broke all-time world records? Yeah. And how many people have squatted with their shins going over their toes and squatted world records? We can name them right now. Mm-hmm. And you still have this battle all the time. People go, well, that's how they naturally want to bend. That doesn't mean it's fucking right. It means you took a shortcut to get strong, and now something's going to give. Versus if you took the time to learn how to squat correctly and fixed all the muscular imbalances, the technique would change in and of itself.
Yes.
But you followed all of your strengths and avoided all your weaknesses, and now you're wondering why you have a fucking problem.
Well, it's just back when I was working in physical therapy, you know, I would, and I still use some of the stuff I learned in physical therapy to watch how my people move, especially when they first come in. And, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, my shoulder's all messed up, this and this. And I watch their movement pattern and I go, yeah, your movement pattern sucks. No wonder you wore your shoulder out. Mm-hmm. Like, and they're like, well, it's the natural way I move. No, it's not the natural way you move. It's the way you taught yourself to move. And then allowed those muscles to get stronger and fire better. Like you built that machine. It didn't just happen that way.
No, you don't just structurally have that position. What happens is, usually through some time in adolescence, when you get these massive growth spurts, you get distinctive strengths and weaknesses based on your physical activity level and what you're physically reinforcing, which is why the Eastern Bloc countries made all athletes get into gymnastics and tumbling from the age of like 3 to 9 to develop all around dexterity, coordination, and balance between the muscle groups, then specialization.
Yes.
And the only person in the West that I've seen to talk about that is an author named Istvan Bali that has like 300 people in the NHL. Really? So he's put 300 people in the NHL in the last 20 years, and he has these 3 phases of training. Train to train, which is a lot of tumbling, gymnastics, and coordination-based training. Mm-hmm. Train to compete, which starts to put them into a competition setting, like, say, hockey, for example. At the train to train phase, they're learning how to just skate, maybe hold their stick, but most of that shit's off the ice. Yeah. It's just be a good fucking athlete. Then the train to compete is we still do some of this ground-based shit off the ice, but we have a little bit more of a specific mindset on your training to be a better hockey player. Then that each of those stages is anywhere from 4 to 6 years. The third stage is train to win. And now all of those things are specifically modified into making you the best hockey player.
Which
It's
makes
the same way
sense.
the Russians were doing everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense, but the problem is it's like I just said, it's 4 to 6 years in each area.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh well, my son, he's not going to do that, or I don't have the smarts, and I'm too stupid to open up a book as a parent and start to understand what this kid really needs to be better.
Yeah.
So, if we step back and look at American sports, most of these athletes that we admire, and I admire as well, are being produced strictly by default.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're just that fucking good because their genetics are that good, and they had the right stimulus at just the right time. But that was all by default. It wasn't a plan. In the old Eastern Bloc countries, all of that shit was planned out.
Which is kind of a positive in a way, because you take guys like I don't consider myself to ever have had like really great genetics. I was never a gifted athlete. Like my father's super athletic. Everything he did, he was awesome at. Everything I did, I sucked at and had to work at it. So like even me, when I reached the height of powerlifting and was competing on the world stage and stuff, I always felt like, you know why I got here? I got here because I was smarter and I worked harder. It wasn't my physical genetics that got me here. It's how I looked at lifting and training. And it's like, this is kind of fair. Like I can beat a guy with genetics because I'm going to work harder and train smarter.
Yeah, but you and I both know what if Chad would have started at 6 years old with gymnastics and tumbling, not to be good at it, and polished all of those variables to be a powerlifter without showing that they're trying to be a powerlifter. We could have missed these particular windows of why you struggle with sports because the stimulus wasn't the right amount at the right time. Whereas maybe your dad, and I'm just guessing, works on a farm, carrying shit back and forth, taking care of livestock at 5 and 6 years old. And then by the time he's 10, his work base is so fucking high that when he actually applies to sports, he's fucking already got the raw materials.
No, that's I have not thought of that.
Right.
That's amazing to me. Cause I've spent time thinking about, okay, when we say somebody has genetics, like what are their genetics?
Oh, it's a plan. I mean,
and so I've always went like maybe a genetic guy just knows how to throw a baseball. Like maybe they're just born with better proprioception. But now, like you're saying, maybe it's not born with it. Maybe it's the development as a child in those important years.
Born with it, but think of it in this manner: you could be a Ferrari, the top level Ferrari, but you just don't have the key.
Right.
And the key is the stimulus at the right time, at the right place, with the right amount of intensity and the right amount of direction. That's the key. That's the environment. But imagine how many dusty, shitty, brand new Ferraris are sitting and don't even realize that they are because they don't have the key.
Yeah.
Or they can't open the door to the garage to see the Ferrari.
Yeah.
So it's a mixture. There will never be genetics play everything or hard work plays everything. Your dad was an amazing athlete, which probably allowed you to work hard enough to get to the world stage, but you had to just take a harder way to get there.
Yeah.
Versus maybe Chad would have been better, faster, longer if somebody would have recognized something earlier and then had this idea of train to compete, train to win, and you would have developed into that situation.
Right.
What I find interesting with the Russians is they were able to take average people and make them world class because they were smart enough to train them at a young enough age at the right time. Versus the Bulgarians, like, if you don't have the raw materials, get the fuck out of here.
Yes, which is way more impressive. It's way more impressive to me to take the average person and make them great. Like, how hard is it to take a Bo Jackson and make him a professional athlete?
Well, imagine this. What would Bo Jackson have been if he actually would have been caught earlier and he was forced to actually work out because he was lazy as all get out? He had zero work ethic with weights, zero work ethic with practice. He said, give me the fucking ball, and I'm going to show up game day, and I'm over it. So imagine if he would have been found 30 years earlier in the Russian system, it would have, it's unbelievable. But that's the thing, the what if.
I think that's kind of the same thing with you and me both too. Like we'll see an athlete that's putting up some of the best numbers in the world, but we're like, well, wait a minute, he's got a weak point right here that he could fix. Or his training, he's not doing this. And it's like, but I did the same thing with myself coming up. Even when I broke my first world record, I didn't go, oh, I broke a world record. I went, okay, I broke a world record. Now how do I keep improving? What do I have to do to keep improving?
My superpower, honestly, and one of them, but definitely one of my biggest superpowers was the fucking power to listen. I wasn't one of those guys that was at the local YMCA, and I was the strongest fucking person anybody had ever seen in that YMCA at 19 years old. I was already stronger than Timmy. I was already deadlifting right with Dawson, and I could out fucking squat both of them in their best day ever, nearly combined. And I was smart enough to understand that I didn't know everything, and drove 3 hours away to learn from Chuck and George and Louie.
Yeah.
That's a fucking superpower.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people can't do that.
I know. And a lot of it too is like, that's what we were talking about, is sometimes knowing how to get someone better hurts worse than not knowing it all, because when you don't know it all, you can't help.
Yeah.
And then when you can help, but nobody wants to hear it, it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah. It sucks. That's interesting.
Right? Yeah, it sucks. You've made your own prison. So now when I get on YouTubes and I look at Instagram, it's literally, I can't look at other people's pages unless I really know them, because I just get so fucking frustrated, because I could help them, but what am I going to do? I'm going to message them, hey buddy, check your DMs. I got some advice for you to help you. Who the fuck's this guy?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, obviously they look me up or look you up, they would know, but my point being is like, wait a minute. At 21, I had a superpower to listen. Do you really think this fucking guy is going to listen? You know?
Yeah.
And that's where everything in this fitness industry becomes so cyclic, because you get smart enough to understand the whole picture, or at least most of it. Now you're too fucking old. And now the next generation won't listen. And then it cycles back around. Then it cycles back around. With everything. Training Smart. Training Smart was smarter and more pronounced. You know this. 2003 to 2006, everybody was looking for the best way to train, the most scientific way to train. Now, it's find a fucking freak and beat him into the fucking ground. There's no science to it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, where a lot of people just will, and you hear it all the time. I hear it, like if I do go to a local gym, like I hear it all the time. Well, that guy's genetic. Well, that guy's this. Well, that guy's that. Well, who gives a shit what he is? If you learn how to train right, you can make yourself. I mean, what's the limit? There's no limit. Well,
the thing of it is, they're looking at the wrong staircase. Mm-hmm. So if I'm on the first flight of stairs, why am I looking at flight 60? Yeah. Look at flight fucking 2, asshole. Mm-hmm. Right? So like, if I want to be the baddest dude in the world, why don't you start off by being the baddest dude in your gym, then be the baddest dude in the state, then be the baddest dude in the country, and then work your ass up to being the baddest dude. If the problem is that the drive to it is too extreme, so therefore it looks like too big of a step.
Right.
Nobody realizes the power of putting your head down and making one small step for 10 years every day. Yeah. One small step, making it to the gym, training a little smarter, whatever that step is, you're making one small step. You do that for 1 decade, dude, you're ahead of everyone, because everyone goes, well, that's 6 stories up there. I can't reach that. You could if you put your head down and just go, boop, 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 right?
That was, I was talking to Eddie one time, and me and Eddie kind of had the same thing. It was when I heard him say this, I'm like, dude, that's what I did. He was like, when I first started, I wanted to do good and everything, but my main goal was if I go to each meet and I do better than I did before. And I go, that's what I did too. Winning a meet was cool, but I had a long-term thought. And I'm like, dude, if I just keep getting better, I'll be where I want to be. I just got to keep getting better.
Why are people not strong? Because of that. Why are people broke? Because of that. Why are people unhappy? Because of that. They compare everything to the top. Mm-hmm. And why don't you try to get to the fucking middle first?
Yeah.
Like, everybody wants to be poor to rich, but nobody wants to go poor, middle class, and then rich.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same thing with strength. This is the same fucking problem. And we've done this to ourselves, not me and you, but the industry. We've sold everybody that you can get stronger in 30 days. You can get leaner 30 days. You can do this in 6 weeks. Nobody says, hey, you want to be a real badass? It's going to take 10 or 15 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what's funny. Even interviewing you and with a lot of my guests, I'm like, dude, where did you start? Because people are like, oh my God, he put up this big bench. And I'm like, they don't even realize that they started when they were 12. Or they got 15 or 20 years into it. Like, it didn't happen overnight.
Or they didn't realize this. I was stuck at 500 for 2 years. Then went to 520 for a year. Then went to 545 for a year and a half. Then went to 570 for about 10 months to a year. Then finally hit the 600 mark. And it took me, listen to this, it took me 12 months to go from 600 to 611.
Mm-hmm.
So was that just, oh, Matt benches 611?
Yeah.
No, you weren't there through all those years. And you know what the funny part is? Those sticking points weren't training. It was here. It wasn't, and I'm not talking about smarting I'm talking about what I knew, how to train smarter,
right?
How to attack the problem with more information. That's what broke the barriers, not working out harder.
Well, that's kind of what we said earlier too. What got you to the 500 isn't what got you to the 6. You had to keep, and the stronger you get, the harder it is. The more you have to adapt and learn. But I think that's the same thing if people are going, Wenning benches 611. Do the research, man. Like, find out about Matt Wenning. Where did Matt Wenning start? How long did it take him to get there? How did he get there? How did his training change? I mean, you can get that knowledge from reading a book, or you can get knowledge from actually talking to people and learning to people and asking questions of people too.
I know. And this is what's crazy. This might be a good guideline. It's not true all the time, but I think it's good. Your training, if you're learning more and talking to the right people and reading the right books that are on my desk right now, your training should look 10% different every 12 to 24 months.
I would agree with that.
10%, because you have this skeleton of what I would consider beliefs. Like, I believe max effort conjugate repetition method. I believe that those things don't change, but I have ideas that change as I learn more.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah. And even like the template, I mean, I basically did a conjugate the vast majority of my career, but that conjugate changed the whole time. There was always something different going on.
Oh yeah. And that's the thing is, like, think about how drastically it changed when I switched to raw with the winning warm-ups and, like, you know, switching everything from non-gear. It was a transition. But what a lot of people don't realize is that Westside Barbell, we had, with no shirt, George, Kenny, myself, Tony Baloney, I'm trying to think of some other guys. We had 6 or 7 600-pound raw benchers in the gym at all times.
Which is pretty crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's what people didn't realize, because we were using bench shirts, but we trained every 2 to 3 weeks completely raw.
Yeah.
I watched George Halbert smash a 635 raw bench at 235 body weight.
That's crazy.
Right?
That's crazy.
I mean, it's insane. And he really wasn't built to bench big weights. He had
not at all. Not at all.
He was fucking fast. Kenny Patterson had a much better build to bench heavy by a long shot.
Yes.
But George was smarter.
Yeah,
so it was one of those things where that's why.
George was kind of like had long arms. He didn't have a huge chest, like not barrel chested wise, you know.
No, he wasn't a big, short, thick guy that you would think would do that. He looked athletic as shit. Like, he almost looked like a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's another, people go, well, I don't have the genetics for that lift. Oh, bullshit. Like, optimize what you have and you just get fucking stronger.
I truly believe that within reason, obviously a 120-pound guy is not going to bench 405, but within reason, I think if somebody wants to train long enough and smart enough and hard enough with the right intensity and the right deloads and the right time, I truly believe that almost any grown male can bench press 405, but they're just missing some key component. 500, we're talking genetics. 600, absolutely for sure. But every male, if trained properly for long enough, some people get there faster than others, can bench press 400, but they're never going to see it because they don't want to work that hard or they don't want to learn that much.
And I think people would be surprised at how Jesus, how do I say this? I would think they would be like, people are like, oh, well, I have to bench 5 days a week. No, you wouldn't. You don't have to bench that much per week, but you got to be consistent over the years.
Yep. You stimulate enough to progress and not enough to overtrain. That is a slippery slope that most people just don't have the cognitive ability to understand. Which is why simplistic programs wreck the fitness industry because you really think it's that easy. Like when I try to tell people, like I had this conversation actually early this morning working at the dealership, and guy goes, "Man, you know an awful lot about the body." I go, "Well, you know an awful lot about diesel engines." I go, "Tell me about how diesel engines fire." He goes, "Well, it's I never even knew this," but he's like, "Well, it's pretty complex. You got to bring in this and that." I said, "Now add in hormones, bone density, ligament tie-ins, and or tendon tie-ins and leverages, right? Bone lengths. Then you need to understand dynamic effort methods and max effort methods." Like I started explaining all these areas, which are master's degrees in of themselves. And he goes, "Fuck." I go, "Think about it. When you build a race car, right? You have a guy that is an amazing dude at building engines. Then you have another guy that's really good at body work. Then you have another guy that can build chassis and transmissions really well. Then you have another guy that knows how to wire everything. Do you think that there's one guy that can do all of that at the best in the world? No, because they're all different degrees of mastery with completely different thought processes." I said, and that's what makes coaching so difficult. You're dealing with the hardest particular machinery that the earth has ever seen in the human.
Yeah.
You're constantly aging, you're changing in, hormone profiles, your muscles adapt, your ligaments, tendons, and passive tissues adapt or get injured. Then you have to change how you do things because of injury. There's all of these factors that you have to at least have a surface area of knowledge to really expand how you can help anybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Then you got to tie in all the fucking diet and then all the rest and the recovery and the sleep and the REM and understanding all of that shit, right?
And then you get a bigger body with, like you said earlier, it was I think the way you said it is your organs don't grow. So now you got a bigger body with the same size organs that got to function that. And then that doesn't even put on top the mental end of it. Because that the mental game is a whole nother level too.
Yeah. And I go to the biomechanics stuff because that's my degree. But then you go to psychology. Now you're in a whole nother profession that they're still trying to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's why you have sports psychologists and strength coaches and offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators and head coaches. Nobody can know everything and nobody can be a master at everything. But for some reason, a coach is supposed to know all.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where it becomes interesting, I think, and why we have such a problem in the field today is because we just can't understand everything.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine if you and I could stay at 29 years old for 50 years, what would we know?
Yeah.
We'd know a lot, right?
It'd be a lot, yeah.
But then when you get about 33, 34, you're like, I can't fucking train like I did at 29.
Yeah.
I can still be just as strong, but I got to do it smarter.
Yep.
And that's why longevity is one of those bar stool, pillars that has to happen. Because when you last a long time, you can see this change in your body, this wave of how things have to get smarter. You can still be just as strong, if not stronger, but you must attack it in a smarter fashion. And that's why longevity is a key component to the pillars of knowledge.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. Yeah.
So one of the other things that was always interesting to me about you is kind of after you got out of West Side and stuff, you eventually hooked up with the fire departments and you started training the fire departments. And from what we've talked in the past, I'm going to go out on a limb here and I'm going to say your training is not hugely different from a power lifter to how you're training those guys.
Yeah.
And we talked one time about like the first one you signed up with, and like as soon as they got the next year's like injury reports and stuff, they're like, we're saving shit tons of money. We're paying this one guy to train us, and the injuries are almost nil compared to what they were.
Yeah, actually, I can send you the graph at some point. You can put it into something, you can see it. But we're saving one department. I work with 5. We have one department we keep a close eye on because we have for 17 years. On average, about $460,000 a year after they pay me.
They're saving
that.
Yeah.
Now do it with another department and then another department, and then now everybody wants a piece of it, and now you just don't have enough time.
Right.
When I went and worked with the dealership, I gave them a price that was beyond what I charged the tactical fire departments because I didn't have time. And now what I'm starting to realize, it's not a money thing, it's a time thing.
Right.
And why you're absolutely right. Why the strength training doesn't look much different from a powerlifter to a tactical is very simple answer. They're fucking weak.
Yeah.
So when you get somebody stronger, it's amazing what disappears. But there is a science and a smarts to it that they need to get strong in a particular way, in a particular fashion, before you can institute the powerlifting modalities. But the powerlifting modalities are the goal. Right. The goal is these are our measurement tools, but we have to take a longer road to get there because we're reducing injury, and it's not a performance aspect. The aspect is the injury reduction due to the increase of strength, which is a much different parameter than just focusing on what we focused on in our prime, which means that we have to attack it in a smarter way, a more developmental way, and a slower way in order for the passive tissues to catch up to what the muscles are capable of doing.
Right.
And that's where it becomes very, very tricky because yes, at the core, it's very similar, but the way to get there can be much different.
Yeah. But it kind of boils down to, like you said earlier, you have your max strength, your dynamic strength, and your rep strength. And they're firefighters. They're going to experience all these things. At some point, they got to run in and get somebody and get them out. They might have to lift up some 500-pound, who knows, at a nursing home. And then they may have be at a fire for a long period of. I mean, you're really using all those different types of strength in that job.
Back it down and think about this for just a second in a lifter's mentality. I walk into a building and I got about 5 minutes before the roof caves in from the fire. I see a 400-pound person laying on the ground, and I got to drag him 100 fucking feet. You tell me why you wouldn't want to do it faster and stronger and longer. Mm-hmm. Meaning the dynamic effort method is going to be needed because you need to get that shit done now.
Yeah.
The max effort method is going to allow the dynamic method to even function because maximal strength has to be high enough. And the repetition method, if done correctly, is utilizing an endurance capability like winning warm-ups and accessory exercises to a complete failure. So when the muscles start to burn and fatigue, you're used to it and you're not going to crumble to pieces. Mm-hmm. You tell me what I'm missing here.
Yeah.
Right?
It makes sense to me. I know, like with my football players, I have a couple indoor football professional players. Their training's not like some of them. If I can fit them in a group with my power lifters, I'll fit them in a group with my power lifters because the training isn't that much different. Of course, I'm paying more attention to injury. That's super. I mean, I don't need 1,000-pound squatter to play football, but
no. You want somebody who can do 405 like in 1 meter per second, though.
Yes. I need him to be fast as hell, and I need him to have enough strength to push around another 400-pound dude. But basically, I can easily modify my programs to do that.
The easiest way to get to that point is to find the weakest link, which is usually maximal strength.
Mm-hmm.
If I raise maximal strength, my ability to create rate of force enhances significantly, especially in the first 2 to 6 years of training, which is going to be high school or college. So again, strength mirrors speed if trained correctly with the dynamic effort method as the window, the gatekeeper to displaying the strength at a fast rate.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, it really. I mean, it all goes in. One of the reasons I like conjugate is because for me, conjugate was always kind of an outline. Mm-hmm. It's like here's principles that make sense to me that I believe in and I like. Now it's just a matter of modifying them.
Basically, you're walking into a cafeteria, you're taking your cafeteria tray, and you're picking out what you think you need. Mm-hmm. So it'd be kind of like a smart coach would be like, I got your blood work right now. Let's look at this. Oh, look, we're deficient in A, B, C, and K. Okay, go pick A, B, C, and K off the cafeteria line. You're eating that today. Same thing with training, right?
Yeah.
So that's what's funny is that's what they called a piecemeal conjugate system was the first name of the conjugate system, which basically meant find the weakest shortcomings and the exercises that are limiting factors and select that through the cafeteria of the training process. Mm-hmm. Case closed in the story, right?
Totally makes sense.
Plus, the fastest way to get strong is not expending more energy. It's expending energy in the right area.
Mm-hmm.
So I can have the strongest legs in the world, but if my lower back can't hold what my legs can do, what are you going to squat? You're going to squat what your back can do, not what your legs can do.
And if you continue to hammer your legs and not work your back, now you slowed your recovery down when you could be focusing and putting a little more focus on your back. and utilizing everything, and your lift's not going to go up.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where it gets so complex, because we're so frustrating, because some of these new coaches are like, well, I can't believe you don't tell people to train quads. I'm like, I've never seen someone, they can't leg press if they've been training for a while, at least 750 pounds. You know any 750 pound squatters that you train? Well, no, blah, blah, blah. Because their fucking back and their core can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So why are you doing all this leg work when their fucking core is the weakness? And it never changes when you get stronger. Those areas just need more and more and more work. But ironically, what's funny is those areas are very small and they get injured very easily, and then they're neglected, which I can't understand.
Yeah.
Right.
I was actually, when I first, like, I lifted mostly for sports. And then I didn't do my first powerlifting meet till I was 27, I think, my bench meet. And shortly after that, I went, I don't know enough. And I found Dave. And, like, I was a fucking quad dominant, hardcore quad dominant. Because for throwing and stuff, we always did Olympic lifts. So I was always doing Olympic style squats. And, like, the first time I got on a glute ham raise, it was fucking horrible. It was embarrassing.
Imagine if you'd have been training those areas. And what's funny about you, the people that may be listening because of me and don't know you well, when you were hitting those big world records in squat, you had some of the most impeccable form. You looked like a West Side guy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And you had your hamstrings and quad development at all equalized, pushed you into, I think you squatted over 1152.
Yeah, I did like 1174. I did a 1221, but judging called me on it.
Yeah, I mean, think about that.
But that was,
you would have never got to that level if those areas wouldn't have been balanced.
No, I would have never. If I would have kept quad squatting, I might have done 8, maybe 9, if that. But when that happened, when I figured that out, I'm like, dude, my quads are huge. Like, I don't need to train my quads. Like, I'll train them every once in a while just to keep my knees healthy. And I put all my effort into my posterior chain.
Yeah.
And then once my posterior chain caught up, I still didn't work my quads that much, because even squatting the way I was, my quads they're still getting worked. They're still used. Mm-hmm. So, like, I mean, I went years and years without doing much for my quads specifically. Yeah. It was just a waste of energy.
Yeah, they're never going to be not attacked. The problem is that you got to understand they can't be primary.
Yeah.
They got to play the part with everything else from those afferent motor patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So if my hamstrings and my quads and my hips and my lower back and my core and my TVA are all functioning together, you got a 1,000-pound squatter. Mm-hmm. You're mixing one area, which is why you don't want to bend traditionally. Well, he just squats that way because it feels natural.
Yeah.
No, he's squatting that way because he's showing you where he's weak and where he's strong, and you're focusing on the strengths because you want another checkbox in your little, I got another 500-pound squatter, I got another 800-pound deadlifter, when you could have made them stronger than anybody else in the world if they just fixed those areas.
And I think that goes back to the coachings. Why I want to put 30 pounds on your squat in the first month instead of going, You know what? I want to put 150 pounds on your squat in a year.
Or 5 years.
And the first couple months, we're going to be fixing the shit that's fucked up. So your squat might not go up right away, but I'm thinking long term.
Yep. I remember Eddie came to my first meet when I squatted 700, and he goes, man, if you can hold together for another couple of years, maybe 3-4 years, you'll squat 8. And I'm like, I'm thinking in my head 3 or 4 years. And I'm like, well, I don't care, however long it takes me. I ended up doing it in a year and a half. But the point was, I remember asking Eddie about that later. I'm like, why'd you tell me like 3 to 5 years? He goes, I wasn't going to help somebody that just wanted to hit a big number and leave.
It's true.
And I'm the same way now, right?
It was, I mean, even when I tell this story, I think after I did my first 7, or I think it was my first 7, I went, I want to do 1,000-pound raw squat. Mm-hmm. And everybody, even my training partners, are like, dude, I don't think that can be done, and I don't think you can do it. And I'm like, just wait. I go, I'm not giving you a time. I'm telling you I'm going to do it. I don't know how long. It may take me 5 fucking years. It may take me 8 years. I'm going to do it. Period. I've made up my mind.
Yeah.
And it was not, I think a lot of times I try to tell people too, I go, listen, my first meet, I totaled 1,700, my first 3-lift meet.
Sure.
It was like 10 years later, I totaled 27. I go, I put 100 pounds a year, and it almost averaged out to close to a year, 100 pounds a year on my total. I go, but then break that down. That's 3 lifts. So that's 33 pounds per lift, which is still pretty impressive.
But for 10 years, it adds up and it accumulates quickly.
And like everybody who thinks, oh, I'm going to bench 400 pounds my first year of training, I'm like, no, you're not. Like, don't even, you're setting yourself up for failure. Don't even think that way.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact thing, so it's going to sound probably kind of stupid because I'll probably get the math wrong. But there was somebody that showed they were testing people's mathematics, which is kind of similar to what you're saying. They said, would you rather have $1 million right now, or you take $1, but it doubles every day for like 300 days? And people are like, oh, I'm taking $1 million because it's only $1. It ended up being like 3 million.
Yeah.
It was something insane. They watched it compound, and you're like, holy shit. Because in my mind too, I was like right off the top of my head, I'm thinking there's no fucking way that's not $1 million. And it was triple that.
Yeah.
And so
that's all them little gains that keep adding up.
Little gains over long periods of time equals way more than one big gain, and it's stuck forever.
And I think kind of with our conversation already today, one of the big gains people don't calculate is knowledge.
Oh, and that's one of the biggest gains, because guess what? And you know this as well as I do. I think you're a couple of years older than me. Your physical body are only going to allow you physical gains. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be stronger than everybody else, but we both know we can't be as strong as we were at 35.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. No matter how hard we want to train, even if we did want to train that hard, our bodies are going to fall apart.
Yeah.
But the shit we learned in between that can be passed on until we die.
Yes.
And so actually, in my opinion, we need to have the strength to have the street credit. But the knowledge that we gain when we gain that strength is really what keeps us valuable far after our prime.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, definitely.
So,
without a doubt.
Telling people like, look, quit looking at tomorrow and look at 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it goes back into something that Charles Poliquin used to say to people all the time. People overestimate what they can get done in a year and underestimate what can be done in 10.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I think that's totally true. Totally true.
Yeah. Which is the same problem we're having with the fitness thing, right?
And
I
even
want to be this in 8 weeks or whatever.
That knowledge, like, I mean, if I wouldn't have, when I first did my powerlifting meet, if I wouldn't have said, listen, Chad, you don't know enough. So suck up your fucking ego and like go learn. And I started that process I see a lot of lifters they'll just beat themselves up. They take the whole hardcore mentality and it's like, okay, they did good. They're like a mid-level power lifter now, but then they get stuck. And the stuck is because they didn't learn anything. They don't have the knowledge to go, wait a minute, I'm not making gains. Why is that? Like, I just don't have the genetics. Oh, bullshit. Your training sucks. Your technique sucks. You don't use your mind. That's why you're not getting better.
Yeah, that's why I think when we talk about training intensity or, looking at it as a broad spectrum, the education process is so much more important than the physical because it's going to save you wasted energy over many, many training sessions.
Yes.
Everything I go into the gym and do has a purpose, a reason, and a plan.
Mm-hmm.
For most people, it's walking, well, okay, my plan is I have to do legs today. Or I have to squat, or I have to deadlift. Well, what's beyond that?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're lucky, they'll say a percentage or something. And then if you're lucky, you'll say, well, how are you going to build your body and to recover from that? What's the plan? How does that develop into next week, in the next month?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you just lost 95% of anybody that works out.
Yeah. Most of them don't think past what's going to happen when they leave the gym.
No, exactly. And that's where we have the problem, I think,
Yeah, because if you, I was telling somebody the other day, I go, all right, let's look at the numbers here. I go, okay, say you train 5 days a week.
Yeah.
You go in for an hour. You train 5 hours a week. You think you're going to get stronger in 5 hours a week? Because you're not training outside the gym. Like you need to be getting a solid 8 hours of quality sleep a night, depending on the person. But so absolutely. How many hours you spent 5 hours a week? How many hours a week did you spend sleeping? How many hours a week are you going to spend eating? How many hours a week are you going to spend on flexibility and mobility? And that could be a weak point too. Mm-hmm. If you can't retract your shoulder blades, I actually saw this. I was working with like an IFBB pro, huge back muscles, insanely huge back muscles. Could not retract his scaps hardly for shit.
Isn't that crazy?
So I'm like, you're hurting your squat because he wants to power lift too. I go, you're hurting your squat, you're hurting your bench. Like just because you don't have the flexibility to put your body where you could put it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's crazy to me. But like all these other things, part of training, and one of the best things I heard from Dave Tate was he's like, dude, if you're doing it to get stronger, then it's training.
Yeah.
I go, that's true. If I force down another meal, that's training. Because I had a hard time backing off of training. Because when I was a kid, it was beat the crap out of myself. I literally would squat in my basement till I couldn't physically walk up the stairs.
Oh, I believe it.
Never mind the fact that it took me like 2 weeks to recover from it, which I didn't pay attention to because I was back squatting again within a few days.
It's in those three. Yeah, it's in those three pillars though. It's easy to train hard as fuck and not know what you're doing.
Yes.
And it's easy to do nothing at all. And it's really hard in the middle to train optimal.
Yes. It's
That's
very hard.
Because most people are wired A or B, but they're not wired in the middle. So they're either I'm alpha as fuck and I'm going to do like what you did and I did when we were kids, or I don't want to touch any of that at all because I'm not alpha at all. But the person that can balance in between the two is usually the long-term champion because they're going to take their time. They're not in a rush. They're not alpha in it. They're going to outsmart it. Yes. And I truly believe, like I had some gifts, but I outsmarted a lot of my numbers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Which is another thing when people are looking at it, like research. If you think Matt Wenning's cool and you're impressed with what Matt Wenning's done, research how Matt Wenning got there. Like people don't want to do that.
No, I think we have a big problem with making sure we understand history because a lot of things, the way to move forward is still in the past. We just have to go find it.
You gotta learn from it.
And I find that it's sad that the lifters in the 90s and the early 2000s were training smarter than the lifters that train now. And all they have to do is open up a fucking book and read it.
Well, I wonder that with today's technology, I'm like, man, there's so much at your fingertips to access now. I didn't have any of that. But
Which
then
is almost a good thing, though.
Yeah, but then I go, well, with having all that at your fingertips, how much crap is there that you got to weed through?
Well, it's not even that though. It's a lot of it, in my opinion, is back in our day before all that shit exploded. You had to be somebody to have a voice.
Yes.
So imagine Louis Simmons wasn't going to write an article in PLUSA unless he was one of the top powerlifting coaches in the world. Now you got some jackass that has no accolades, no experience, and has the same voice. That's the problem.
That sums it up. That's actually a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, the little bit of information that we had was more quality because people that were putting out information had to have some credentials.
Yes.
Like Paul Quinn and Louis and Charlie Francis and Medvedev. You think the Russians were going to let Medvedev write a book unless he had a PhD? So think about this. Medvedev, to write manuals for the Russians, had 2 gold medals personally, a PhD, and then ran the Olympic Training Center for weightlifting for 16 years and then wrote manuals. Now we can coach 2 people to a fucking state meet, write an online manual, and now we're a fucking expert to the average person that doesn't know jack shit.
It's true. It's very true.
You think those manuals were floating around Russia and like fucking, oh yeah, look what they're doing on muscle and fitness. I bet that's what they're doing down in Moscow. No. You get my point? So it's
it totally makes sense.
In our time, you had to earn the right to have a voice, and average, website or a magazine wasn't going to call you, hey, I heard you bench press 225 at the Y. Would you mind writing an article for us?
Yeah.
See, that's the problem.
So there's one thing that just popped into my head during this conversation. I remember talking to Ed Cohn way back in the day because I ended up, when I was trying to like get myself to let myself recover a little more, I kept running into all these top athletes and hearing things. And like, I remember I was talking to Ed Cohn one time and he's like, yeah, I'll be warming up sometimes. And it's like, I'm like, man, something feels really strange in my back. Like something's not right. And he would just call it a day. And I'm like, wait a minute, what do you mean you called it a day? You mean you went back later that day and trained, or you trained the next day? Or like, I couldn't get my brain to even understand that. Cause it was like, don't be a pussy, just get it done. I had that mentality and I had to change that mentality. And that was one of the hardest things I ever did. But again, people go, oh, linear periodization, this is what Ed Cohn does, and they make up in their head what they want to believe instead of going, no, like And especially today, like Ed Cohen, I've never seen Ed Cohen refuse talking to anybody.
No.
Like you could actually go, hey, I like Ed Cohen. I respect him, man. Next, when I see him, or I'm going to message him and try to ask a couple questions and actually learn like what he did. And but there's all these preconceived bullshit in our heads that we want to believe based around thought patterns that we've had. And like with the injuries, based around the fact that you've been thinking incorrectly, you're still thinking incorrectly. You have to change.
Well, and what a lot of people don't realize with Eddie too, and I'm not speaking for him, but I do remember talking about this. The only thing anybody ever studied from him was his peaking phases.
Yes.
They didn't understand what he was doing in the off season. And that's one of those things. The other thing that they don't understand is there's going to be one guy every 2 to 3 generations that is built exactly like Ed Cohen with 350-pound man hands on a 220-pound frame that's only 5'4", which allots a little bit more structural damage than the average person's built.
Mm-hmm.
So he could train a little bit more fucked up, in my opinion, deadlifting too often because his leverages allowed it. But you're never going to be able to utilize a program that Ed used if you're 6'1".
Yeah.
And that's just my thought process on the thing. You have to find, doesn't mean you can't get as strong as you can be, but you have to look at everything in totality and go, okay, this guy's 5'4" with a 900-pound fucking deadlift and his hands can palm a basketball.
Yeah.
Like, so he never had a grip problem, right? And his squat pattern was real vertical shanked and perfect technique, which helped him be 5'4". Not that we couldn't do it as bigger athletes, but imagine if Eddie, for some reason, had our body weight. What could he squat?
Yeah.
We don't know. I mean, 1,300 easy.
But
the point is,
I think people rely on his genetics, and it's like it's not his genetics. He still trained really good for what he was doing. But you got a point too, and I tell people this because I've met people over the years that really love Chuck. They're like, Chuck's awesome, and they're like, I'm going to train like Chuck. And I go, just because you think Chuck's awesome, you cannot train like Chuck. First of all, you're not researching how he got there.
Let's talk about that because I was probably Chuck's longest standing training partner. So when I squatted 903 and 04, we squatted together from 04 to 2010.
That's a long time, yeah.
I don't know anybody else that could hang with Chuck for 6 years. And there will be no one of that magnitude of that work ethic. And do I say that all of it was right? And would he say all of it's right now? No. I think he could have got there a lot easier, but his mentality was that old school, I'm going to grind you to the fucking ground. I think I started to break that thought process, which is why he's going to start coming and working for me a little bit. He saw me getting better with less work and wanted to figure it out. But by that time, he was in his early mid-40s, where my age is now, and he had just too many miles on him. But I was the first guy to get, after he broke his neck, I was the first guy to get his bench back up to 500 raw. And the reason and how I did it was training smarter, not harder.
Right.
And he's like, fuck, if I'd have known I could get this much stronger, focusing on these areas versus wearing myself into the ground, I would have done it. And so it was interesting because I was probably the first training partner he had that he watched and learned from, whether he wanted to admit it or not.
Right.
He learned how to be more optimal. Because he'd go to a meet and it was either I'm going to break a world record or I'm bombing out. There's no in the middle. And he saw me just get 30, like you're talking about, 30, 40, 50 pounds better every fucking time I did a meet because I strategically planned it and didn't overtrain.
Right.
And I think that was the first time he had seen that because it was the first time he had been around somebody that had my brain, but also my longevity thought process.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so he could tell you that yes or no, but that's what I saw.
Yeah. And that was for a while I was asking all my guests, and I'm pretty sure I know what your answer would be, but I would go, okay, if you could train less per week and get stronger, would you do it? And I've had I've had a lot of guys tell me no.
I would be 100%. I'm innately, and I don't know. Again, it doesn't match anything that I've done, but I'm innately a lazy motherfucker, dude. So me going in and training, especially when I was younger, I think a lot of that started from getting hit by the car.
Mm-hmm.
I was stuck in a hospital bed for a whole year.
Yeah.
So like when you tell me I need to go home and rest and watch some TV, See you
All
later,
right.
motherfucker. But that was also a major advantage because I never wanted to party. I never was out chasing girls. My sanctuary was going home in a quiet room and watching a movie or listening to like Alice in Chains, like Jar of Flies, relax and chill.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one of my biggest superpowers and what allowed me to recover later. But my mindset on how to train, because of how many people I've trained over so many years, I've started to see how much stronger people get with so much less.
Yes.
That I almost want to tell the people you've had even on the show, punch them right in the fucking dick and be like, you guys understand that I have seen people bench. I'll give you an example. You know my big training partner, Big Rob,
Mm-hmm.
the big beard. He's just a monster. He's like 350 pounds. He fucking pulled 700 and benched 500 training 2 days a week.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm like, motherfucker. It made me actually pissed at myself because I'm like, dude, I was training 4 or 5 times a week to get to that level. And now I watch him, he could do it in 2.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe it's because the training was smarter and I learned more. Just take all that out of the equation. How the fuck in most people's mind is it possible to deadlift 700 pounds and bench press 500 pounds? You only train twice a week.
It is.
Most people are like, you're a fucking liar. I'm like, dude, I'm telling you straight out. And Rob will tell you himself. But the point being is like, it changed everything of what I thought by training people that maybe didn't have the work ethic or the money to train 4 times a week, or maybe not the home lifestyle, like wife, kids, maybe a really hard job. And then I watched them just keep getting better and better and better with minimal. I'm thinking, because the first thing we think of with that mindset is, well, if you want to be the best you can be right now, you need to train more.
Mm-hmm.
And I disproved that for 15 years.
In my prime, because I have horrible sleep, and I mean I was up for days on end with my insomnia and stuff. I was training on average 2 intense sessions a week and then 2 recovery sessions a week. That's all I was doing.
I believe it.
And even just recently, I did. I'm nowhere near as strong as I was, but I thought, you know what, Chad? Like now you can test all your shit out. Where before, you're like, I got a competition coming up. I'll test some stuff, but I don't know if I'll really test some stuff. And I go, I'm only going to let myself lift once a week for like 3 months. And I'm going to test my bench. And I go, I'm just going to do 315 for reps. My bench kept going up training once a week.
Dude.
And I'm like, how is this even possible? I mean, it's like, it all makes sense logically, but there's this emotional part of my brain, my blue collar emotion that's going, how does this work? How does this work?
Well, that's the reason why some people are extremely, not always, but extremely wealthy. They learn to make the money versus their time make the money.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. Let's say for the fact of saying that I make $10,000 a month in person, but I make $30,000 a month passive. How do I do that? There's no fucking way I could do that in person.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured out how to make money passive.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing out an example. But the point being is like, you have to learn to make the training actually do what it's supposed to do. And that could be 2 times a week.
Yeah.
If your other lifestyle habits are not conducive. And sometimes even if they are conducive, it still won't make you better.
Mm-hmm.
That comes down to genetics. And that's where I think people start to go into the drugs faster before they're actually ready because they're putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole of another lifestyle choice that's fucked up.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. There's an old story where Mike Menser he's in the gym and he's training or he's talking to one of his clients and he goes, there's this other guy, I can kind of see him listening out of the corner of my eye. And he goes, he's a guy who's been in the gym all the time. He's been there for 5 years and he's the same strength he was. He looks the same as he was. And he goes, so I come in the gym the next day and this guy comes up and he goes, hey, Mike, can I ask you a question? He's like, I heard you talking to your other client the other day. And he goes, man, everything you said really makes sense. But he goes, but if I don't come in the gym every day, what am I going to do? And Mike's like, you could read a book. You could educate yourself. You could go for a bike ride. And I think a lot of people do get sucked into, well, this is what I do. I go to the gym every day.
Yeah.
And it's like, but you're not, I mean, why are you going to the gym? I mean, if you want to go to the gym to beat the crap out of yourself, that's cool. But then don't tell me you want to be better. Don't tell me you want to be stronger.
For some people, it's social interaction. For others, they think that, and I think for the average person, and I'm not saying to the people that may want to train more times a day or more times a week, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if you're trying to do it for performance. If you're not looking at it as getting an aesthetic goal or a strength goal, and it's a mental relaxation type thing that makes you more physically active in general, and it gives you more of a social life, I'm all about it.
Yes.
But if you are doing this for performance, your mindset has to be completely different.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. And
Yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons I actually, when I was trying to convince myself that I knew I needed more time to recover. I was trying to get in my head to make myself do that. I ended up talking to Louis because Louis had started doing some of his recovery, those like 3 and 4 minute time sessions and stuff. And so I ended up talking to Louis about it, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to try that because then I'm in the gym and it's actually going to help my recovery a little bit. And mentally, I was in the gym, so maybe it'll help me deal with not training hard 5 days a week. And it actually worked. It helped me out. I found my recovery did a little better. And I was, okay, at least I was in the gym today, so that everything's right with the world kind of thing.
I have a manual that's a mini workout manual. But what I find is I'm very, very laid back on when I tell people to take it, because guys that were wired like us in our prime, we don't understand what mini workouts mean. I can tell you from experience, I've watched Louis do those mini workouts, and they weren't fucking whatever he was thinking he was doing. He was beating himself to the fucking ground. Yeah. He just thought it was a mini workout because it was only 5 minutes long.
Yeah.
But he would do shit, and me and Chuck would look at him and go, what the fuck is he doing? You know what I mean? And then the next day, I can't really squat with you guys. My back's fucked up from doing this fucking clubs. Or what. I'm like, dude, you're not recovering. Like, it's supposed to be like relaxing and restorative. And
yes,
I think the hard part with guys that were wired like me and you and Louis is that you have to add extra workouts in with a very, very respected thought process of making it recovery. Because for me personally, I had to go to a different gym, which is why I got one in my basement. I will not play anything hard in my basement. It doesn't get above Alice in Chains' Jar of Flies. Chill as shit. When I go down to that basement to do a mini workout, it's like 90s R&B. It's totally chill, and I'm just getting blood flow.
Yes.
Because once I turn that music on, or walk into my facility, or walked into Westside Barbell, it was fucking blood. And I can't go into a place where I have that intensity. My brain hardwires itself to, you bring 100% here. So that's one of those things you have to be really careful with.
Yeah, I totally agree. It took me a little while to learn how to tone it down. Like, I mean, the first time I did dumbbells for 4 minutes, I'm like, I could do hundreds for 4 minutes. I'm like, dude, this is not the point, man.
Yeah, it's hard to wire people into that. So I ask a lot of questions before somebody asks me about purchasing it. I try to give them as much information as I can. Like, look, this isn't for the psychotic. This is for the very smart lifter that understands these are restorative movements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you definitely have to be set about it. So there's one more question I have for you. Sure. I can't remember if I ever actually asked you about this or if I heard it. I heard like your master's thesis was on post-workout drink.
No, it was on squat shoes.
Was it? Because I thought I read one that it was chocolate milk was the best or something like that.
We were doing a study on that, but it wasn't my study. It was a study I was helping with.
Okay.
So what I picked is it was still the same fight it is today. Elevated heels versus flat soles. And this is actually when it first started. You started seeing Olympic shoes at the USAPL competitions. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what the fuck? This is stupid. Which, again, was laziness on the coach's part, because let's just use all knee and we'll grind these motherfuckers to a pulp. Ironically, the guys that I competed against, I can't figure it out. Why are they not around anymore? Maybe interesting, right? So I did this pretty deep study on flat soles versus heels, but I picked the wrong data set to use as my master's. So we used ground activation forces. Mm-hmm. And what we saw, I was using 500-pound squatters, which I felt was pretty good for a paper.
Yeah.
But even their technique wasn't much different shoe to shoe because they weren't advanced enough. We needed guys like me and you.
Right.
And so I had two guys in the study that I couldn't use because one of them was me, because obviously you can't do that. And Zach Riley, which was an Olympic hammer thrower. And we both used the shoes, and we were both 750 pound to 800 pound squatters at the time. And you could see a vast difference in it because of the advancement of the person. This is where I get really pissed when people ask me about fucking research papers, because I've done research papers and I know the level of the athlete makes a massive difference in the outcome of the data.
Yes.
So when Zach Riley and I both switched different shoes and squatted, you could see a massive difference. But I also collected side video analysis data. And that's where we saw the shank change in angle based on the shoe, which showed put a heel on, you go more quad, put a flat sole on, you go more hip, which in turn is what we want.
Yes.
With a powerlifting style squat. I get why the Olympic lifters need to do it, because they're catching at extreme angles. At a powerlifting meet, when you need to break parallel, there's no fucking point. You're just making yourself weaker. Yeah. That was my initial thought process, which I actually proved in the kinematic data, but I did force ground reaction data. And so you couldn't see the foot pressure change, but you could see the shank angle change. And that's where I fucked up in my master's and had to conclude that we didn't see a lot of difference because of the data selection I picked, because it was so much faster to collect the data through the force plate than it was all of the angle data in the motion analysis. Right. So that's what we did. And we put at the end what we had tried and saw the difference in the advanced athlete, but we couldn't use it, because we didn't have enough subjects. But I used 12 500-pound squatters. And I thought that was a pretty goddamn good selection, because I don't know any other studies that have 500-pound squatters.
Yeah, but you're right. You're right, though. Their technique and their level is so important to what it is. Yeah, data and studies are, you really, like, I see a lot of people just look at the end result, and I'm like, no, you got to go through and like look at the study. Mm-hmm. Who did they actually do this on? How advanced are they? What do they know? I mean, if you take a bunch of newbies, and I've seen this where it's like new lifters, they do a whole study and they come up with this claim, and I'm like, but you did it on everyone new. Like, none of these people are good lifters.
You did it on people low level that you can't really collect data, because every sample is going to be different just based on they suck. Mm-hmm. That's where you start realizing even at 500-pound squats, the data is inconclusive, because every rep in the flat sole was different and every rep in the heel was different. Every rep.
Yeah, so there's no consistency at all.
But when Zach and myself did it, there was definite differentiation between the shoe. Mm-hmm. Because that little change in a high level is a lot. Right. A little change in a decent level is nothing. Yeah. Right? Like, I look at it like cars. Me and you like cars. If I'm getting ready to light my fucking shit up at the drag strip and my rear tires are about 2 PSI off in pressure what they should be, in an 11-second car, it doesn't fucking matter. If it's a 6-second car, it fucking matters.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's the point, right? So most studies are done on stock cars at the drag strip, meaning fucking people that are recreational. And you don't see any studies done on fucking like the top level dragsters in the world, because they're too busy winning fucking prize money and breaking world records in that shit. Fuck your study. Yeah. I know what works because I'm winning. Yeah. And so that's why I always use the statement by Charlie Francis: researchers are here to prove what I already know works. And it's true. But that's why if you have a mixture of research and application and personal experience, you're fucking up there, because now you can decipher through the bullshit. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's interesting. Mm-hmm. This whole strength training, health, this whole industry's really kind of strange.
Oh, it's beyond strange. And it's not just this industry, it's everything, but
yeah, no, it probably is. And I mean, especially like once I think, because man, I try to, I always, like you said earlier, history, like I try to look at my training over the years, and like I'm not looking back on my past and trying to relive glory days, although I do. Some of the old stories are funny, but like I'm trying to learn because I still want to coach and I still want to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go back and go, God, I was dumb, man. I remember growing up reading Muscle and Fitness, and it wasn't until I hit the high level that I learned that's all a bunch of crap. Like that's
Yeah.
people just putting down articles. They don't give two shits. They're trying to sell magazines.
I know. It's tough to sell too because that's all the average population has access to because they're too lazy to go look at anything else.
Yeah.
Or they're not smart enough to look at anything else.
Yeah. And then like
Or they're
you
not
have
around
all
long
these
enough.
what's that?
Or they're not around long enough to need the fucking information.
That's true too. We talked about how quickly people go in and out of these fields.
Mm-hmm.
But even as like, you know, the theories that I had at one point, it's all changed. Like you get to the top and I remember, I think I did a seminar with Dave once where we were talking about the evolution of an athlete. And it's like you start trying to learn everything and you think you know everything and then you find out you don't know shit. And then you come back to the top and now you're starting to learn again. And you're just like, you get to the top and you're like, fuck.
Oh, this is similar with education. So Dr. Newton told me this. You know, he was one of the highest level researchers in strength and power in the early 2000s. An undergraduate teaches you to jump through hoops. A graduate degree shows you that you know a bunch in one small area. And a PhD shows you that that small area doesn't mean shit. And there's 500 other areas you better understand to put the whole picture together. That is higher level education in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's all crazy. I mean, it's fun though. I mean, I think one of the reasons I love strength is that I almost know it's a puzzle I'm never going to solve, but I'm still trying to keep getting as close as I can.
Well, that's what makes it fun. If you really knew all the fucking answers, it wouldn't be fun. I mean,
yeah, it'd be kind of boring.
You're constantly looking for new things, better things, while still maintaining what you solidify. And I think that's what makes it fun for me. If you ever look at it like, well, fuck, I don't know this or that. I'm like, dude, I love studying like blood work now. I love studying like things that in my early 20s I didn't give a fuck about because I realized the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. Again, we run into is what if we could stay 29 to be mature like we're 55 at 29 for 20 years, 50 years? What would we know?
Yeah. What would we know? What would we have achieved?
We don't know. And that's the thing is like, and it's just a cycle all the time.
I mean, it's interesting too. Like I think when you started and then when I was heavy, like nutrition, it was like, dude, get your protein in, get calories in.
Yeah.
And we were eating shit. And now that I look into nutrition more, and I need to learn more about the blood work thing because I think that's a great thing I haven't tapped into. But I look back now and go, God, how much better could I have recovered if I actually wouldn't have eaten so much crap?
Well, think about this, Chad. This is something I tell myself and my clients. It's not what you eat, it's what you absorb.
True.
It's not what you eat, it's what causes inflammatory markers and causes the body to not want to absorb anything. So if I'm eating stuff that I'm having reactions to, an inflammatory reaction to, it's fucking up my hypertrophy, it's fucking up my hormones, it's fucking up my gut. Half the shit we were eating, dude, when we were trying to stay big, we were gaining weight because we were fucking inflamed. We weren't putting on any more muscle. And we were damaging our fucking bodies at the same time for no fucking reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find it disheartening that we see these bodybuilders on ass loads of drugs and like strongman telling people, well, I eat 10,000 calories a day of this shit food. And they really don't understand what they're talking about because they could probably eat a quarter of that. And if it absorbed correctly, they get the same amount of muscle without the health damage.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree.
Again, that's something that you have to learn over time, right?
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. All right, Matt, I think I'm going to let you go because we've been talking for about an hour and a half, and this is just the part that we recorded. So
yeah,
you have, of course, do you have two Instagrams now or one? It's Wenning.
I just got one, so I got hacked about 3 years ago. Long story short, I was qualifying for my blue tick, and I got 12 hours later, I got this Meta fucking email. Hey, congratulations. We just need this information. They hacked my fucking account. Then I ended up buying it back, and I had all these bots on my page. And what I started to realize was my followers would go up 5 and then down 5. Then they just do all this weird shit that I couldn't control. So I tried to get a hold of Instagram. They're no help at all. And then I post this fucking fat dude sitting on the couch, like doing online workouts. And I said, online workouts 2023, And it's just this dude smiling with Twinkie shit all over him. And they took it down as fat harassment.
Oh my God.
So I challenged it. And they told me your account will be disabled within 24 hours. Nothing I could do. So I converted everything over to Winning Strong. And that's verified now. But dude, I mean, back then it was going rampant. I realized I thought if I got an email from Meta and it looked legit. I'm thinking, well, fuck yeah, I got my blue tick. And I already had like 300,000 followers. And now I'm back down to like 12,000. But the good thing is my YouTube has got 105,000 now. That's the one that actually matters.
That's huge.
Right.
And what's your YouTube?
YouTube's just Winning Strength.
Winning Strength. And then you have a Patreon too, right? Yes.
Yeah, so the Patreon's where I try to do a lot of Q&A because I was just getting flooded with Instagram and YouTube and all that. So I use that money to push into my production for all my YouTube videos and my outreach. And then so I answer questions there. We post special exercises and, going into like some training and workouts and why you do this and why you do that. So we put that there so that way it helps fund what I'm trying to give out for free.
Mm-hmm. And then you have your website.
winningstrength.com.
Which you have, man, you got a lot of manuals and there's just shit tons of good information on there.
Yeah, we're dropping 5 new ones in the next week. I've been working on for like a year. So yeah, the manuals, in my opinion, are second to none as far as experience and who they've been trained with and what they've done. And some of those manuals have actually been even developed through training Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Mm-hmm.
So like the over 40 manual is almost identical to how I wrote everything for Stone Cold Steve Austin. So that was actually pretty interesting. And then the over 65 manual was for no experience. That manual was developed off my mom. So my mom came to live with me for like a year and a half. And I said, if you're going to live with me, you're fucking working out. And so I took her into the gym and she got up to a 210-pound deadlift.
I saw a video of that one.
Yeah, 115 or so bench and like a fucking 175-pound squat at 67 years old and never touched weights.
That's awesome.
And I was like, being stronger and you're saying, well, I'm too old for that is a fucking excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Because if my mom can do it and she never had any experience, and my mom sucked in gym class. She was like last picked at dodgeball. Fucking, they basically gave her in high school. She didn't have to take gym because she sucked so bad. It was just like a pass fail. And so don't ask me where my athleticism came from, but
I have 2 clients right now that are 75, and he had done some stuff when he was younger, and she had never lifted weights, and she had osteoporosis.
Yeah.
We just did her first bone scan after she started training with me. Perfect. Exactly. Everything's good again. And
there's
I'm
so
like,
much that can be fixed through exercise, and it just fucking makes me so mad, But it is what it is. You can help who you can help, right?
Yeah, the people that are willing to do it and try it. Yeah. So
Exactly.
So you have new manuals coming out, and you have the new book coming out.
Yeah. So the book is by Human Kinetics. It's a hardback. It's actually a full-size academic book. It's got 1,000 and roughly 50 references.
Damn.
I fucking bled in this book. So it was all the shit that Louis was talking that I actually went and found the actual citations for and made it understandable. So
I'm gonna have to check that one out because I would like to. I know some of those books with the Russian programs. It's like they're kind of tough to keep up with.
Yeah, it's Russian. It's Russian ideals with my programming, but it's understanding where all of it came from,
right,
and why. And but definitely get it from winningstrength.com when it comes out, because not only do I get more if I sell it versus Human Kinetics, but I will personally sign anyone that goes out off of my website.
Okay. Which
is going to be, pretty cool. But yeah, it's going to be at Amazon, Barnes and Noble. They're going to print it in 5 languages. It's going to be in Chinese, Spanish, English, German, and I want to say French.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, so that hopefully that'll help. I think it was one of those things where, again, I actually wrote that book in frustration saying that I was going to be done with the fitness shit. And this is my gratitude towards everything I've learned. And if I have that book come out, I'm out. But that way, it's not my fault if you train like a fucking dumbass, right? But somehow I get stuck back in. It's just a mood I have for a couple of months, you know. And I wasn't going to stop training people. I was just going to stop trying to be a presence on the internet. You know what I mean? So I felt like I needed to give back, and I felt Louis was the catalyst of me learning this. But I felt that a lot of his books are hard to understand. They're not edited well, and they're really just not conducive for giving this information to the next generation, in my opinion.
I remember reading. I think I said this to Dave, after my first seminar. I went up to Dave and talked to him, and I think I said, "Hey, so I've been reading all Louis' articles, and it confuses me. And like what you just explained to me is pretty simple." I go, "Did I get this right? Did I miss something?" He goes, "Oh no, that makes sense."
Yeah. And me and Dave had a long talk about it. Actually, and I want to give a lot of props to Elite FTS and Dave. He was more than kind enough to let me come out to his vast library and find things that I couldn't find on my own.
Yeah.
And this is what you find as well with the internet. You will not find the proper information on training on any website or any free download. The shit that I went and found was stuff that's not even in fucking print anymore.
Right.
Like there's shit that Dave had and that I got from Charles Poliquin when he passed away. I have never seen discussed on open forums or out in public. This is stuff that's like serious shit that we should have had in the hands of so many years ago.
Yeah, isn't that sad?
Like, it's sad, but that's
sad
the
to me that happens.
Yeah, it's brutal. But again, a lot of the names in the books that I have sitting over here in the corner should be household names in the fitness industry, and nobody knows who they are, which is crazy.
I guess that's why there's so few best of the best.
Very true.
But I'd like to see it. I'd like to see tons of, like, I think a 400-pound bench ought to be standard.
That's what I say. I mean, at least a fucking 400-pound deadlift.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you should go into commercial gyms all the time and go, "Oh yeah, there's some guy benching 4. That's cool. Whatever."
I think I talked to you about this the last time we ran into the Arnold. I said, wouldn't it be nice if everybody in this fucking shithole, if there was 405 at the front entrance and you had to pick that up before you could walk in?
Yes, that would be so great.
But I mean, it's supposed to be at the biggest fitness conference. You know, I got a fucking 13-year-old girl that can deadlift that, and you're telling me we got grown men that can't pick that shit up, and I'm just thinking like, fucking bullshit, right?
That's so funny. All right, Matt, thank you for being on. I appreciate it. I want you guys to go check out all his stuff. Like, seriously, Matt's one of those guys that I keep on the top of my list, and I always try to find out what he's doing because I've learned shit from him over the years. And, like, I'm a huge fan. We didn't even really talk about Wenning warm-ups. I'm a huge fan of Wenning warm-ups. I mean, I incorporated the Wenning warm-ups with some of my power lifters and didn't change much else. And then their next meet, they're like going to the deadlift. And like, man, I feel great. Like I'm still ready to go, man. And I go, yeah, just from that little 10 to 12 minute warm up every day.
Well, next time I make it out to Sacramento and go to Mark Bell's or Stone Cold's out in Lake Tahoe, I'll look you up and hang out with you a couple of days.
Yeah, I know. I saw you were down. I haven't seen Steve in a while, but I saw you. I think your last motorcycle trip, you stayed with him down in Gardner.
Yeah, I stayed with him a couple of days in June.
Yeah.
This June. So, and I had to go explain to him the manuals because I gave it to him, made him all this shit for him, and then he reads like the first page, can't understand it, just throws it in this fucking. I'm just like, how in the fuck, dude? I get out there and I'm like, why don't you just call me and ask me what this is? Because I designed it around his whole gym.
Yeah.
Exactly what he had. Well, I fucking didn't fucking blah, blah, blah. You know, and I'm thinking, dude, like, so I sat down and walked him through every exercise. I'm literally dealing with somebody with, like, you know, a fucking learning disability. He's like, oh, I get it now. So he starts fucking doing it. And I'm like, bro, we could have been a year and a half ahead of this. You know, but
because I'm only probably like 45 minutes from his house, I think.
Oh, really?
Maybe 50 minutes from his house. And I'm
which direction? East?
I'm
south?
I'm north of him.
Oh, okay. So you're more towards what's the border up there? You got Nevada, and then what is that?
California. No, I'm like I'm like in Tahoe.
California, Nevada, so you're on the north part of Lake Tahoe.
Yes.
Got it. And I was on the south part.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's fucking awesome. I'm jealous that you live out there because I love it.
It's beautiful. Yeah, but I told him, I'm like, dude, like, give me a buzz. Like, because he came up here one time and we took our side-by-sides out in the desert up here because he hadn't been up here much. And I'm like, dude, you're not that far away. Like, I'll help you with training sessions or whatever. Like, get your technique squared away. Like, and he's like, hey, yeah. And he's so busy, though. I don't know what.
Yeah, it's one of those things that he's got a way that he likes to do shit. I got him back to back squatting, and I got him back to deadlifting, and it was like pulling fucking teeth. I'm like, guys, people don't understand. Like, training that level of person, honestly, you don't want any part of it. You know what I mean?
It was funny too because he told me, he goes, I can't squat because my knees hurt, and I go, no, you can squat. You're squatting wrong. I go, I'll help you. Like, seriously. You make me laugh when I hang out with you. I have fun. Like, I will come help you squat.
That last cycle, he's almost 60. That last cycle, I had him squatting right under 400 pounds.
See, that's awesome. That's awesome.
And he was doing it with a vertical shank and pulling the pressure off his knee.
Mm-hmm. That was my first thing. Was I go, I know he's a knees forward Olympic style, and like,
or because he lifted to fucking look good.
Yeah.
Instead of lifting to perform right, so I had to reteach him all this stuff. And I think it was a pride thing a little too. Like, when you're already in your late 50s and you're at the end of that physical career and you've beat yourself to death training wrong and then both in the ring and breaking your neck, it's kind of like, if you learn it now, it's just a punch in the dick.
Yeah, there's a little bit of admitting, well, okay, I did it wrong for all these years. And that's tough.
I'm telling you, people don't see, you only remember him when he's stone cold, but 6 to 10 years prior, he was a fucking tank.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he was huge.
Jacked, but he did it the wrong way and damaged a lot of shit. So again, not always how you look, a lot of how you function, right?
Mm-hmm. I had one of the guys trains Triple H, Joe DeFranco.
Yeah. Oh yeah, his buddies with me.
I think on his podcast, when I was on his podcast, we kind of talked about it, and he was like, "Yeah," he goes, "I was worried when I first trained him because he called me up and his shoulders were screwed up, and DeFranco's like, I know what's wrong. His anterior's like jacked to shit, and his posterior sucks."
Yeah.
And he goes, I was actually afraid, like, after the first couple times he was going to fire me, because I told him, like, no more pressing, like, we got to build your back. And he goes, luckily a couple months in, he was getting measured for a new suit, and he called me up all excited. He's like, hey, my chest measurement's bigger, my shoulders are bigger, so I got a bigger measurement. But he actually listened to DeFranco, and his shoulders got better, and he was able to do a lot of stuff. And
yeah, I think there's about, you included, I think there's about 10 dudes that we don't have to go into name, but there's about 10 guys in the country. If they couldn't come and train with me, they would go to these other 10 guys. 10 fucking guys. Mm-hmm. That's it. Right? Me, you, DeFranco, Zach Evanish.
Yes.
Stan Efferding.
Yes.
Right? O'Hearn in some ways, because he's lasted so fucking long. He actually trains really smart.
Yeah.
And then I'd have to think about it for a while longer. But, I mean, the list is small,
mm-hmm.
right? So, but, yeah, you're definitely included in that list, man. So
it's an honor to me.
No problem, buddy.
I think because did I get Steve in touch with you?
So Steve heard me on Mark Bell's podcast, and he friended me. And then the next fucking day, I opened my phone, and like you included, like 20 people, like, dude, Stone Cold Steve Austin just followed you, because he doesn't follow people back.
Yeah.
And then that's when you and I talked about you going riding 4 side-by-sides with him and shit.
Yeah.
But then I think he asked you about me.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
To help him a little. And you're like, dude, Matt's awesome. And that's when he actually started to talk to me, was because of your recommendation.
Yeah. No, I do remember that now. He was asking, I would, dude, if there's a guy to learn from, like, dude, Matt's done it, learned it, like.
Yeah, but that's the problem, is I can only get him to learn for so long, and then it's just like, motherfucker, right?
Yeah, I have. I've had a few people that I've, over the years, like, I get them to finally back off, start focusing on recovery. They get way stronger, and then a couple months later, they start going back into their old habits. And I'm like, why? It was good. You were doing good. Why did you go back?
I can't answer it, dude. It's just one of those things.
So funny. All right, I'm going to hit my outro, and, man, it'd be cool to have you on again at some other point.
Well, hopefully we'll just do it in person next time.
Definitely, yeah, when you're out here or when I'm out there.
Yeah, you thinking about coming to the Arnold this year?
Probably not this year. I'm trying to buy some land, and I want to build a barn dominium and expand my gym. And so right now, that's kind of
I'll just come out and try to see you this summer because I'm going to get my 92 Cummins 12 valve. It's done. Pretty much, we're just finishing the body, and I told Stone Cold I'd drive it out.
That's the bronze and black one. That one's cool. You got so many. That Charger is. Oh man.
Yeah, dude. When you come to Columbus, we'll go for riding. It's nasty.
Yeah, that thing looks like a beast.
It's a Hellcat with no catalytic converters, long tube headers, a cold air intake, a 305 Metco with a 10% overdrive on the crank, and 1400 cc injectors. It's like 820 at the wheel, and that car comes in right at 4,000 pounds.
That's awesome.
It's a fucking death trap. It's a death trap, but it's so clean, dude. I don't even like throwing rubber on the fenders. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, that truck. I've only seen. I haven't seen the whole truck. Have you posted pictures of the whole truck yet?
No.
I've seen little parts, and I remember when you first started it, and I'm like, oh man, that's because I love old trucks, man.
22 inches of suspension travel. When I don't decompress it to make it low on 40s with 1,016 horsepower and 1,900 foot-pounds.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
It's gonna be a fucking monster, dude. I'm running 97 pounds of boost.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So holler at me, buddy.
All right, sir. I'm gonna hit my outro, man. It was awesome having you on.
No problem. See you later.
Thanks for listening to the Courage Barbell Unlimited podcast. For more information, please visit CourageBarbell.com. Until next time.